Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Hormone Genius podcast. Jamie and I are excited to be here with you today. And this is a very special episode for us because we get to honor someone, interview someone that really has inspired so many women in the passions that we both have, Jamie and I have. So we're just really excited about having Leah Jacobson here today, who is the founder of the Guiding Star Project. And Leah is an amazing woman who's accomplished so much, and a mother and a wife, and is continuing to try to spread the good word, the beautiful gifts of the feminine design across the entire world. So thank you, Leah, for being here with us today.
I am so excited to spend whatever time I can with you two, because you two are both so inspiring and awesome. So thank you for asking me to do this.
Leah, we're going to start off by just having you introduce yourself to the world. So many of our listeners likely have heard of Guiding Star. Teresa and I have mentioned it before, but many people maybe have never heard of the Guiding Star Project. So maybe start off by sharing a little bit about you and how you came up with this beautiful mission.
Well, first of all, yes, I will tell you about myself, but with regards to Guiding Star, it has nothing to do with me. And I will always start with that caveat. When you are doing what you were created to do in this world, it's not about you ever. And so this is something that I personally never would have thought of. I never would have dreamed it up. But, I'm the product of a loving creator who thought this would be a really fun journey to send me on. And so here I am. But I am just a wife and a mom. I've got 7 kids. I've been married to my husband, Josh, for 17 years. And we live in small town, rural Minnesota, close to nature, close to a lot of biking trails and lakes. And that's what I love doing. I enjoy spending time outside with my family, with my kids, and just really soaking up the beauty of nature. My other hat, with Guiding Star and as a women's health professional is that I have my master's degree in health and wellness, specifically in women's health and a specialty in lactation care. So I'm a board certified lactation consultant. And so I work with women in that postpartum period, and it's a huge honor and it's a huge blessing to be invited into that really intimate space following birth. That's very vulnerable for a lot of women. And so that's my professional sphere. And then Guiding Star kind of grew out of my work with women's healthcare, my previous work as a campus minister, and just working with young women and seeing a culture that is really broken when it comes to the delivery of women's healthcare and the messaging surrounding women's bodies. And so, like I said, Guiding Star is not something I envisioned or I understood. I thought that I would just go back to school and become a nurse midwife or a lactation consultant, and I would just serve women directly one-on-one, which I would be totally content to do. And that would be a beautiful life. But it became very clear that we need some voices and some leaders in the women's healthcare movement that are sharing women's stories, that are speaking up about the experience of women in healthcare and what young women are feeling about themselves. And so I've taken up that call for the time being, and just trying to do what I can through Guiding Star to redefine and change the culture of women's healthcare for women all across our country.
Leah, I would love to go back to that time when you were a campus minister, because I've heard part of this story. Because what I love about, what you have done and the gifts that you have brought to the world here is that it grew very organically for you. It wasn't like you knew from the very beginning, I'm going to be doing this thing called the Guiding Star Project. Like, it was that women were kind of like dropping in your lap, like these young college women and young women who were entering into marriage and having their first babies. So tell us, and even maybe if you have a story that you have from back in those days, like how did this really organically evolve in your heart?
So I was a campus minister at the University of Minnesota, Duluth. My husband, Josh, and I, we got married really young. We were 22 years old, and we asked the bishop of the Diocese of Duluth if we could move into the campus ministry house on campus to work directly with college students. And I don't know why, but he said yes. He put a lot of faith in us. And so we spent the first 3 years of our marriage living right in the middle of campus housing, roughly 12,000 college students right at our front door. And so we had an audience. We were kind of on stage. It was like living in a fishbowl, kind of, because the Newman House at UMD is surrounded by campus housing and students are in and out all the time. And so as we were just learning what it meant, to be a married couple, we were answering a million questions. And so it was forcing us to articulate our beliefs and forcing us to really live them out and act on them. And so I could say things to young girls about, well, your body and your fertility is really beautiful. But at the same time, I also had to be like applying that to my own life and really walking the walk. And so as we began to have young children, and we had our first baby about a year after we got married. And so I wanted to breastfeed, and I believe breastfeeding was a good thing to do. And it was incredibly hard, and I was so bad at it. And that's why I became a lactation consultant later. But as I was, on campus and nursing my baby and watching student reactions to me, it began to kind of grow this idea that there's something really wrong with how we view women's bodies, because there was obvious discomfort. There was obvious judgment from young people that I was using my breasts to feed my baby. And yet I'd look around and the girls walking by me in the student union were showing just as much breast as I was, but for some reason what I was doing was not acceptable. And so it kind of grew as a little bit of a righteous indignation as I began to understand and recognize that female bodies are expected to act a very specific way in our culture, and it has nothing to do with how they were naturally created to function. And so I began to get a little more vocal and challenge students and challenge them on things like, their fertility and whether or not they believed that that was good and whether or not they believed that they could understand it and work with it. And we started hosting some really interesting conversations and classes on campus. We did a course called Green Sex, best sex of your life. And we talked about, how this idea of unprotected sex, what it really is the vulnerability of natural fertility and family planning, natural fertility methods, it's really unprotected love, and that you're opening yourself up to true relationship and true vulnerability and love. And that when we live in a lifestyle of just protected everything, protected this, like we're protecting our hearts too. And so fascinating conversations with students began to grow. And then I talked with a lot of women's studies students. I talked with a lot of self-identified feminist students, which I would say I was a feminist. I mean, I believe in the equality and the dignity of women's rights. But as we began to talk more, it was just so clear that that only extended in women's place in the workforce and in their career. It didn't extend to their bodily autonomy, and that feminism really was a requirement for a suppression and an alteration of women's bodies. And as somebody working in higher education and helping students and young women achieve higher education and degrees, I just thought this is absolutely ridiculous. If we're going to succeed as women in our world and climb the corporate ladder, but we're required to sacrifice every part of ourselves, our fertility, our hormones, if we're required to suppress and alter our female organs, what have we gained? Nothing. We just fit ourselves into a masculine mold. And so from that and all those experiences, Guiding Star, I think, was just like gestating within me, and I didn't even know it. And all of a sudden one day it was just kind of do something about this. And that's where Guiding Star came from.
So explain.
I don't know how to explain.
That's beautiful. Leah, explain to our listeners what the Guiding Star Project is.
Yeah, okay. So Guiding Star Project is a national initiative, and it's focused on redefining and providing women's health care across our country that really honors women's natural functions of fertility, childbearing, and breastfeeding. As I wrote out my master's thesis for in 2012, I kind of just identified that for women's health care to be truly about women and their bodies and their hormonal needs, it needs to identify the things that are unique from men's bodies. Yes, there's women's cardiac health. Yes, that's a thing. It's different from men's, but men also have cardiac health. There are things that are unique to only women's bodies. And if you're going to be championing women's healthcare, you have to understand and promote and really support those things to optimize their natural abilities. And those things were ovulation, gestation, and lactation. And so those were kind of what I coined the 3 feminine superpowers, or 3 feminine natural abilities. And so as I looked around at women's healthcare centers, I saw that these were really not upheld in any way, or supported or understood. And so Guiding Star became an effort to provide local centers all across the country that are focused on providing those 3 core medical services. And then also recognition that women, as fertile beings, are often mothers. And so our centers also provide drop-in child watch as well. So Guiding Star centers have 4 core services. We'd love to spread Guiding Star all over the country. Every community in our nation should have this type of a center, because it's a place where women are affirmed and told the truth about themselves. So that's our core mission, is to open up these women's healthcare centers and really spread and define a worldview of what women's healthcare should entail.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing.
I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
I love the feminine superpowers thing. I think when I heard that for the first time from you, Leah, I was like kind of mind blown, which, since I work in women's health, I really shouldn't be. I was like, wow, ovulation, gestation, and lactation. I just had never thought about it in those just 3 simple superpowers that we have as women. So to be able to pass that along to other people is now a real gift.
And it's catchy.
Yeah.
It's so catchy. I want a shirt, Leah, just so you know. Love your Asians. Wouldn't that be awesome? Love your Asians. Ovulation.
That would be fun.
Lactation. I'd wear it.
Well, and that's the thing you find. I find this often, is that you'll find organizations and groups that will support one. And they'll, as a lactation consultant, breastfeeding, there's a lot of breastfeeding promotion groups that talk about the beauty of breastfeeding. But yet in the next breath will make, negative comments about our fertility. And it creates a subconscious sort of division within women. If one part of me is good and I should do it, but this other part of me is bad and I should suppress it. I think we're sending a very mixed message about women's bodies. And that message is that it's only good when it fits a societal expectation of what we want from you. We're not going to make room for your body to do what it naturally would. We're going to tell your body that it needs to fit society. And that's really, to me, that's misogyny. That's what we should be fighting. To love true women's bodies is, to be a true feminist is to embrace every part of our ability and say, that is amazing. And we would never think to destroy or suppress that, because that is the fullness of what a woman's body is capable of doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would love to kind of dive into that thought a little bit more, because, a lot of times I feel like we're starting too late with women. Again, women go through puberty, menstrual cycles, they get a certain amount of education. It really is lacking in the message that you're talking about, right? And letting the women know that these things are gifts to them. So we're starting late to the party, and then we're trying to retrain women, or what I would say, integrate women back into their own selves, into the identity of what the gifts of the feminine design are. And that can be hard to retrain. So I would love to hear about, because I, of course, think if we could start with young women and really training them from the beginning to know that what makes you women are these things, and that they are gifts, and that if you understand them, if you are empowered to know them, you wouldn't think to suppress or alter them. You wouldn't, it would just be so natural to be like, okay, well, this is a part of who I am as a woman. Now, how do I bring that to the world, or how does that help me? But I would just love to hear what your thoughts are about that.
No, I totally agree, because I work in lactation. And so it's kind of the last of the 3 feminine superpowers, chronologically. And so I can tell you that when a woman gets to me, oftentimes in her 20s, maybe even her 30s, she's already been living in a culture that's told her, her fertility is a barrier to her success. Mm-hmm. Children are a burden. And now breastfeeding is this really complicated, difficult thing. And so by the time I'm seeing these women, they're so broken, and they are so distrustful of their body. They are convinced that their body doesn't work, that I'm just a lemon. And so if we could back this up, to when she's 9, 10, 11 years old, before she's had those wounding experiences of feeling in some way inadequate, if we could tell her, this might be hard, this might be difficult, but here's all the education to equip you to deal with it and to know that you're not the problem. The problem is a world that doesn't understand you. The problem is people telling you that you need to change yourself to fit some other expectation. And so if we could just give our girls that information coming into it, then they would know, okay, so I'm starting my menstrual cycle and I'm 16. That's okay. It doesn't mean that I'm super late bloomer, that I'm messed up, because all these things that we're not saying, they're internalizing. They're thinking something's wrong with me. Or when your daughter gets her period, for the first time when she's 11, but then doesn't get her second period until she's 13, and thinking, oh my gosh, something's really wrong with me. Like giving them you're okay, you're good, that's all right. And then, through pregnancy, helping them to really understand what a normal, healthy pregnancy should look like, what the normal variations are, just assuring them that you were made for this. You are strong enough, you are good enough, you were made for this. Because then hopefully by the time they get to me as their lactation provider, 3 days postpartum, they have a sense of, I trust my body. I think my body was made good. I can do this. Versus the majority of women I am seeing, it is just, they don't believe they're going to make milk. They don't believe it's going to work. It's a very fatalistic, a very negative sort of, well, I'll give it a shot, but I really don't think it'll work.
I know, even as being a founder of a Guiding Star Center myself, that Guiding Star, the worldview was essential for me as I was working and mothering to start a Guiding Star Center. Like I felt like I could, because someone was saying you can. And it was so powerful. There'd be times where, I could imagine feeling like burdened or weighed down. Okay, I have to work, but I have this baby. But then my perspective was completely shifted in that, hey, why don't I bring my baby to work and nurse her there, or, nurse him there? And it changed my whole experience, while knowing like I did feel so good. And a phrase you use a lot, Leah, is holistic feminism, which I love. I want you to talk about what that word is and what it means to you.
Yeah, and it's holistic with a W. So think of the word whole, so and really truly for us to be promoting a women's movement or feminism, that's to get at the heart of promoting all women as equal, to our counterpart of men. We can't sacrifice any part of ourselves for that supposed equality. Like I was saying earlier, if you climb the corporate ladder and you achieve all the success, that a male dominated culture says makes your life meaningful, but you sacrificed every part of your female, your fertility and what made you super special, and you weren't able to nurse your child like you really desired to for that, you're not whole. Like you've given up a piece of yourself. And so when I talk about holistic feminism, it's recognizing, the mind, the body, the spirit of woman, hormonally, genetically, we are different. We are different from men, but in no way are we less than. And so we need to bring the entire experience of being a woman into our women's activism. If we're going to make the world a friendly place where a mom can bring her baby to work and nurse them, then we need to have practical solutions that consider the whole of a woman's life. Like, it's as simple as having a drop-in child watch at the doctor's office. Like we can do these things. These are not difficult changes. That's why we really need women, in these leadership roles to help pioneer and just demand these changes on behalf of women.
Yeah, real quick. So I just want to share this. I remember looking into the Guiding Star model of healthcare and seeing the word feminist and being a little nervous when I read that. But then when I was reading about the way we utilize that, it's this perfect complementarity between the masculine and the feminine, and this honoring of men while still recognizing the attributes of women and the giftedness of women. Would you speak to that for anybody who may be hearing that word? And, you see those shirts that say that the future is female. And I'm like, the future could be complementary, people. Like, we're meant to go together. It's okay. Will you talk a little to that?
Yeah, I've been happily married, for 17 years to my husband, Josh, and you guys are both married too, so you guys can attest to this too. To say something, such as the future is female, I think is just incredibly ironic. because really, truly, I know that any successes, any things that I do in this world, is because I have a partner. It's because I have somebody who's a cheerleader, who's behind me all the way, providing, that firm foundation together for me to grow upon. And so, yes, the future is female, but without men, it's not complete. It's not whole. It's only half of what humans are capable of. Like, a woman on her own is capable of incredible things. Absolutely. So is a man. But a woman and a man together, I mean, you multiply your capability times a million. I bring out the best in my husband. He brings out the best in me. It's just silly not to, look towards the strengths of men, and utilize them and grow with them and be partners with them. Totally. They're not an enemy.
Mm-hmm. And I would say I met your husband, Josh, at a conference and spent a lot of time with him. And he is an incredible guy. So shout out to Josh for being an awesome support person to you and allowing you to spread your passions and, again, and I have a great husband too, and Jamie does too, but like, this is such a blessing. Like, when you have that complementarity and you are able to do so much more.
Yeah. And I think you understand the feminine when you understand masculine, even if you're not married, but you have a father or men in your life. Hot isn't hot unless there's cold, So it's like, what is femininity without masculinity, and vice versa? I think about that sometimes too.
Well, and I think our culture is so narrow sometimes that we define the feminine and the masculine by these very like shallow gender stereotypes.
Totally.
Stupid things like boys like blue and girls like pink. And it's like, no, that's not the nature of a boy or a girl. Those are preferences. Those are kind of secondary indicators of, their identity and who they truly are. And so I think that if we can kind of chill out just a little bit on some of those kind of like preference type things that really don't speak to masculinity and femininity, we can see that there's actually like innate strengths to each of the sexes that are somewhat inborn, that we can grow and depend on one another and just, like I said, maximize our capability by, it's like the Strengths Finder inventory. Jamie, I know you're a huge fan of Strengths Finder. Like, it's like recognizing like, okay, my top 5 are these and my bottom 5 are these, but your top 5 are my bottom 5. You and I work together. Like, men and women are kind of the same way. Like, we have natural strengths and differences that really complement one another well. And as partners, we can do so much together.
Absolutely. So back to the holistic feminism, because I know there's a book coming, right, Leah? And I just want you to talk about it. I'm like, I know a lot of people are super excited about this book. So give us a little 101 on holistic feminism coming soon.
Yeah, it's coming. I don't know when. I'm still praying. But, the context of it, I think, is really understanding why we are at the place we are as a women's movement. Like, why did our healthcare and why did women's bodies kind of get thrown under the bus as we've tried to progress forward into equality? And so the book talks a little bit about, the history of feminism in the women's movement and really some of the lies that we've kind of bought and that we've kind of assimilated into the identity of woman, which they're not helpful. And if we can just, move forward, reject some of these identities that are not truly us, the kind of world that we can create for our daughters. And so that's really what I'm focused on is how can we make this better for our daughters? How can we, consciously parent them in such a way where they know that they were made strong and that they were made good and that they would never imagine, suppressing their fertility or destroying a pregnancy or totally like mutilating their female body as a right or a sign of progress. That they would see that truly what it is as I'm altering and destroying myself for the world, but not for me, just dream of that day that we can get our girls to that place.
It's beautiful. Speaking of young women, what do you wish every young woman knew about their hormone genius?
Oh, I love that question. I think it's so basic. For me, it's just that, you're not a mistake, that the way you were created was intentional and it was created with purpose and you were really not a mistake. I just wish they would understand that. And that could be some differences between you and the other girls, but that just because you're a little different doesn't mean that you're wrong, you know.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I tell my daughter that a lot because she's always, my oldest is 12. And so she'll compare herself to her friends. And I'm like, you know, you're made exactly the way you were made, and you're not a mistake. Like,
Totally.
That's it.
Awesome. Yeah. And then normally Teresa and I end with a call to action. So we want to ask you to call our listeners to action. What would you like to say about that, Leah?
Well, first of all, I would love for you to, you know, get on board with us at Guiding Star and help us in whatever way you can. Follow us on Facebook, social media stuff would be really awesome. But I think to join us in our mission practically, because our mission really is a cultural change of women's healthcare and how we view women's bodies. And so every listener out there could join us like right this second in their community, in their home, by being more aware of the ways that we lie to women about their abilities and their bodies, and how there's just this negativity that's kind of pervasive about women's bodies and abilities. And so to be conscious of what you're hearing and saying, and if you hear a lie, that you purposefully speak into it with the truth, that you help to reject it and help to dispel it, because so many things are just accepted as, well, yeah, okay, you can't go to college if you get pregnant, or you can't do this or whatever. Like just these things that are just ingrained that are totally not true. That's not true. Don't limit women. Don't limit our abilities. So that would be my challenge, is, you know, make a change in culture by speaking into lies.
That's awesome. And November 9th, there's save the date, everyone. We can include it in the write-up, that there's like a get to know Guiding Star project, a webinar with Leah. So anyway, if any of you would be interested in joining us just to learn more about how to get involved, volunteer, contribute in whatever way, that would be a really good time to learn even more about what Guiding Star Project is doing. So we'll be sure to include that in the comments of this podcast. Awesome.
I know that every woman that hears about what Guiding Star Project is doing just is drawn to it. And I think about when you say speak truth into the lie, people are drawn to truth because truth is beautiful. Like we're all drawn to the truth because what is truly, you know, is like in our hearts in terms of what really, how God made us. And so I know that when women hear this message, they're just like, it's like flies on crap, you know, it's like they just come to it. That's probably not a great metaphor, but
I love it.
Like, I mean, you just start talking about it. They're like, they hear it and they just know that this is the truth that's within them. And so if we are quiet, if we don't speak it, then we're basically letting the lie live, right? And so those who hear this and desire for truth to be out there, we've got to do our part, you know, and we just thank you so much, Leah, for doing your part in speaking truth into the lie. And we just look forward to all of the wonderful things that the Guiding Star Project is going to continue to do into the future.
Thank you guys so much for being part of this journey with me. That's the best part, is having sisters on the journey.
That's right. Sisterhood. We need it. Thanks, Leah, for taking time out of your busy schedule. And we are just so excited for our listeners to learn what they maybe never knew about the Guiding Star Project. So we hope that they continue to follow you, and please share this episode, friends of the Hormone Genius podcast, and be sure to share this episode with your friends. We so appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.